What is up, everyone? I'm here to do a review on the latest chapter of Hunter x Hunter 349 titled Poisoning. This is a chapter I've already read, so I'm assuming you guys have read it already. Let's just get started. First and foremost, I thought this was a pretty solid chapter. Again, it's one of those chapters which is more so building the plot and background rather than those execution chapters where there's the plot just builds to a point where there's action and fighting. It's been going like this for quite a while, but I feel like the biggest thing though is that this one, it was more solid, actual progression of the plot, whereas in earlier chapters you kind of know how it was. It was more so like they were just building the plot just to build the plot, and they didn't really know where they're going, and a lot of the stuff that was said in the dialogue was like literally almost out of like a child's head who doesn't really understand that it doesn't really make sense. And basically, like, there were a few chapters ago that were literally like the most stupidest thing ever, in my opinion. Like the mental thinking behind it was just so flawed, and like it didn't make sense. And I'm particularly speaking about those moments where Jing was like outthinking Kirsten, and Jing was like, "Oh, I already predicted your next move, or I predicted that you were going to do this in order for me to do this, so that I would do this, and therefore you would discover my abilities." It's like, it's too flawed and too unrealistic, and I can go on and on. The same thing with Beyond and that Zodiac member with the glasses and the grandma hat. When they were talking, it was the same sort of thing. It's like, I knew you were going to do this, therefore I would do this, and then therefore you would do this, and I already outthought that. And the author tried to illustrate this very well. And if you guys don't know, he's the author of Yu Yu Hakusho, so that show was pretty bomb and the plot was pretty on point and realistic. This was just, I don't know where the author's going with this, and you would think he would be better at this, especially after doing Yu Yu Hakusho, but no. It's this, complete mess of outthinking that does not make sense, because in chess there's only a certain amount of possibilities that the author can do, and to think 4 or 5 steps ahead, that in itself already grows out into thousands of possible scenarios. So when you're talking human interactions where one possible thing could mean hundreds of possible things already, it doesn't make sense how they describe it. It's like, I knew for a fact that you were going to stage this in order for me to do this. It's like, no, he could have done that for 100, if not 1,000 different reasons. And I know it's somewhat abstract, but I think you guys know where I'm going with this. But a little bit too much of a tangent. Let's go on to this chapter. So it's quite interesting. The very first page, what's notable is that it's very clear that the author, or at least the narration, is focusing on this specific prince, the 4th prince. Why? Potentially it means that he's the strongest, or maybe it's just a eccentric thing. He is obviously one of the more interesting princes out there. Some of the other princes are just somewhat bland and boring, at least from the onset. And in this picture, in this chapter, all the princes are introduced, and it's interesting to see that they are all referred to as prince to exclude them from gendered bias, even though there's females in it. Obviously, I definitely think the females, especially the 2nd prince, Camilla, are I feel like they are a threat. The 2nd prince looks very strong, and so basically, this chapter starts off with this butler pretty much saying the rules for this whole ceremony thing. Okay, you can't start fighting until the ceremony, the bell on the ship rings, otherwise everything's suspended, but yada yada yada. And I thought it was really solid. There's no real plot holes, which is something I always look for, and really very much annoys me, especially with the last dozen chapters. or so. And so obviously, I definitely do think there is a exceptional focus on this fourth prince. Why? Obviously because, Kurapika is behind this prince. There's that whole panel where you see like all these eyes of Kurapika's trap in these canisters behind him, and he's got this like skull throne. He's very, strange, bizarre. He kills like beautiful women and like bathes in their blood and weird stuff like that. And I just want to focus on this panel. It's actually a full page, and what you'll notice is if you actually look at the panel and not just like briefly glance over it, you will see that there's a canister, or at least seemingly either a canister or a TV screen, which seems to house a shadow of a head, and then larger tanks next to these eyes that house torsos, including the head, and they seem to be like somewhat demonized, at least part of them, and then organs and so forth. So this guy's really weird, and one can venture to guess that either he's the strongest, or maybe there's just this focus because he is the most eccentric or related to Kurapika, or maybe the author's like me and he just makes things up as he goes, so he has no idea what he's going to do with it yet, and therefore he's just focusing on this guy for now. I definitely think that's the case, and I definitely think that the author literally made these other princes up on the spot, either the week this was released or the week before. And I think it's very clear in this chapter because a lot of these other princes are pretty bland. I mean, not really bland, but you can tell that the author hasn't really decided exactly what's behind them. And so he's made their characters and personalities somewhat interesting. I for one think that the fifth prince, the haircut reminds me of One Piece. Seventh prince reminds me of Cowboy Bebop, and he obviously seems very eccentric. The ninth prince, very exciting too. Sixth prince is just bland. I think literally he just made him up on the spot. He doesn't really have much premise behind him. He just looks pretty boring. Same thing with the eighth prince, and then 10 through 12 or 10 through 13, all very bland, simple, and they're all very young. Like they're literally like 10 years old, all the way down to the baby who's probably like 1 or 2 years old. Based on how he's drawn, I feel like he's 3 years old, but this author probably hasn't really thought about it. He just drew the baby, and I think the younger ones are obviously going to be a plot twister, or it's definitely a lot of setup for plot twisters, because one, we don't know if these people have entered the competition. Apparently they haven't, but the whole introduction of the narration showing them implies that potentially these princes may pull some sort of plot twister. Maybe the mom wants the child to succeed, and so the mom, smuggles them onto the ship and then waits for the bloodbath to ensue and then kills the last survivor, and then this baby becomes the king. You don't know. But ultimately I think they are potential plot twisters, and that's why they're set up to be, because all 5 of these little kids, they're all doing these very simple, simplistic, naive, innocent things, and it seems like they have tremendous potential based on the sort of dark nature of this series to be like one of those people that end up becoming the king, or end up all of a sudden posing a huge threat. So ultimately we see we go on to the next thing, and we see a different side to the fourth prince. Up until now, he seems to be this very dark character who's almost like a genius, knows what he's doing, and then he displays a sort of Jing-like personality where he's like he's drawn to sort of mimic almost the behaviors of Jing, almost unsure about what to do, and somewhat like playful and cautious. He's like, and I'm talking about the point where he's forced to put his hand into the pot, and he's like, is this going to eat my hand or something? And moving on from that, we do get this new thing And basically, this weird pixie comes out of this pot. She has somewhat Chinese-like characteristics. She throws this sort of thing into... Oh, shoot. Let me just silence this. He throws this candy into his mouth, and then we find out later that this pie is some sort of lineage thing. You guys know what happened. I don't have to re-summarize it. But this thing will, in fact, give the person who swallowed it powers, somewhat like the demonized powers that are very similar to numerous other things. A lot of people reading Hunter x Hunter who have not read these other things will be like, oh, this is something brand new. This demon, this hidden demon thing that helps you, the sacred beast that embodies the vessel and pretty much becomes you, and then it guards you and it helps you out. Well, it's not new. It's probably ingrained in a lot of mythologies, from Greek to Chinese to Asian. And in addition to that, it's probably well, in my opinion, it's been in some manga and some books as well. So if you want to check those out, Toriko is one of them. Shaman King is another. And as far as books go, check out the Bartimaeus series. I actually did a review on that on my book channel, which you can find. It's linked onto on my manga review channel. I have a book review channel, and ultimately you could search it up, youtube.com/Will's Book Reviews, plural. And so you know, back on track here, you know, this whole thing I think is pretty cool and somewhat disturbing. You know, you see the current king, and he has this disturbed, strange little beast, and literally there's like nipples hanging off of these things. Like, you don't know what it is, but it seems to be nipples. There's like, he has like 20 nipples on each side of him, and he's literally like, he has legs of an insect, and it's basically a sacred beast that's I guess hidden, but at the same time present, and it guards the owner. But it's interesting because it embodies the owner, but at the same time it does not obey the will of the owner. So that's different from Toriko and Shaman King to a certain extent, where this thing does its own thing. But at least depicted in this chapter, it seems to, even though it doesn't obey the owner, it seems to more or less help the owner nonetheless. And so I'm just going to read the description real quick. A divine beast born from the strong prayers from one's offspring, prosperity. It haunts those with a strong affinity for the dead. Who knows what that means. It feeds on the aura of those that it haunts, and those people have influence on its form and ability. But since it's not created from their own body, it is not bound to the will of its host. So it's, I think maybe it was translated wrong, but I think it's saying that it haunts people who have an affinity for the dead. So maybe people who have died, or ghosts, or have killed a lot of people, and then it feeds off the aura, so it does negative things to these people. But at the same time, and it may be translated wrong, so it may be misinterpreting, but I feel like it's saying that the people that it haunts also has influence and control over its form and ability. So it's like, you're hurting me, but I can control you to a certain extent, and that doesn't really make sense. And it's not saying that the actual owner of it is the one who is being haunted. So it's very strange, and it's interesting. Obviously there's a lot of history behind this. Apparently it has something to do with the very first king, and it's constantly been passed down, and it is somewhat of a test to see who's the rightful successor, because if the guardian beast embodies a weak owner, it creates a weak vessel, and then the beast sucks. I think it'd be very interesting. Obviously the children have a great potential. At the first time I read that, I was like, the children obviously have huge potential, because there's a potential there's so much creative potential behind that, because literally you can have like the youngest baby child throw a plot twister and pull out this guardian beast that's 100 or 1,000 times stronger than any of the other princes, simply because he has a strong core personality behind him. And a little bit of a nod at Shaman King, where the baby is really intelligent, or maybe the mom is helping the baby out, and ultimately he has the strongest guardian beast. But finally we get to this point with Beyond, and they do this sort of interrogation thing, and then Beyond responds, "Two problems. I don't know anything about any spy, and I don't know anything about the ceremony." And Kurapika detects him as telling the truth. And I find this ridiculously stupid and pointless, because it's either, there's two things. One, it's either because like it's so obvious a foreshadow of what's going to happen, or two, it's a depiction of how unrealistically stupid Kurapika and the Cowman is. And what I'm talking about is that just like 2 chapters ago, I believe, it was mentioned that by Kurapika that, hey, there is that possibility that someone has the power on Beyond side to erase people's memories so that they themselves do not know of certain events, and therefore they are not detected by my power, my lie detecting power. And so it's so obvious that what's happened here is Beyond. I mean, it's like the way it's depicted here, it's almost like deliberately obvious. I don't know if other people picked it up, but in my opinion, at least if it's not intentional, it's still one of those possibilities that I find stupid that Kurapika didn't pick up on. And because of that, it means that the author may have wanted this to be like one of the plot twisters. It's like, Beyond got away and escaped, and managed to escape because he employed someone to wipe his own memories, and then when he escaped, the spy came in and so forth, and they helped him out, and therefore he escaped. And so ultimately, Kurapika decides, hey, we know his abilities, and the enemy doesn't know that I have this ability, so we have a small advantage. We're going to use it. We're going to restrain this guy, this traitor, at the opportune time. His name's Seiyu. He's the monkey guy. Obviously, another nod at the Monkey King. There's been a million nods at this Monkey King. There's a new film coming out that's another nod at the Monkey King. The Monkey King's huge in Chinese mythology and Chinese pop culture, as well as recent films like The Forbidden Kingdom. There he is again. Ultimately, Seiyu, they have decided to restrain him at the opportune time without anyone realizing it, therefore preventing him from helping Beyond escape at the moment when he enters the Dark Continent. The problem being, though, is that like I feel like, and this was mentioned by I think Pearston, that Beyond, although he has spies that's going to help him, he has his own abilities that will help him escape, and he seems very confident in his abilities. So therefore, I think he's still going to escape. It's obvious. Kurapika's doing all he can, but I think it's going to be pointless anyways. And obviously, there's going to be a huge amount of crap going on, because Kurapika's literally he's doing all he can, but once he reveals this sort of stuff, as illustrated in this chapter, the Zodiacs are going to be pissed off. They're going to be like, you lied to us, you were doing stuff behind our back, I can't trust you anymore, and there's going to be a lot of disruption that may be more cause for problems than benefit. And finally, the biggest thing, though, is that the final panel in this chapter pretty much says that there's 6 requests made for bodyguards. So basically, it's saying that, at least from my interpretation, the people who did not pass the hunter exam, who are screened out, those potentially are the people who are employed as the prince bodyguards. Therefore, they, even though they got screened out by the hunter exam, they still managed to get onto the ship. And again, just to conclude and summarize, I think again that the reason why all 12 of the princes were depicted, although it's just cool to depict them all, I think potentially even the ones that were mentioned as to have not managed to procure bodyguards with who have passed the hunter exam, they potentially may hold potential plot twisters by potentially appearing at the last second or smuggling themselves onto the ship without being noticed by the other princes, and then just waiting for all the other princes to kill themselves, and then you have this little child who ends up becoming the king. And I guess the final big thing would be the eyes. So obviously the fourth prince is very strange, and he's collecting all these eyes, and it could just be an eccentric behavior from him. But I definitely think that he potentially has the potential, and I don't think the author has decided yet, but he has the potential to hold tremendous power, maybe beyond that of the Chimera Ant Kings. We already know that the people in this arc, in this current arc, or the creatures in this new arc, this Dark Continent arc, they're on levels higher than the Chimera Ant Kings. So that I'm very excited for that. In fact, I definitely think that Jing himself may be on a higher level, maybe Pearson too, than the Chimera Ant King, which is kind of sad because you know, Netero sacrificed himself to beat this guy. But I definitely think maybe this fourth prince is as well, because of his eccentric behavior and because of his collection of the eyes. The scarlet eyes are not just for fun. They embody something that's like overpowered, in my opinion. When you turn scarlet, you manage to have full capability of any classification of any spell type. So enhancer, conjurer, whatever. That's so overpowered, and maybe he may be using them somewhat like Danzo did in Naruto, and using all the eyes to maybe create some sort of super level ability where he can use every single type, conjurer, specialty to full extent, and then just be severely overpowered. But that's my prediction, and as always, like, favorite, comment, and subscribe. Let other people know. If you guys know friends who watch Hunter x Hunter, share this video with them. And as always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe. I'll see you guys in my next video, and follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and all other social media. See ya.